swapped our wedding slideshow with clips of me and my ex as a joke. He left before the vows. Hey, Reddit. When I downloaded this app years ago, I never thought I'd be one of those people that went through such a terrible experience. Yet, here we are. Let me start from the top. My name is Jessie, 32 female, and this past June, I was supposed to get married to the love of my life, Derek, 31 male. You heard the title. I'm sure you can guess that we didn't get married. The problem started about a year ago when my ex got back into my life. Chad, 33 male, and I dated in college for 3 years. He was my first everything, and I was his first everything too. Naturally, we experienced so much together. We stayed together until the end of college. Unfortunately, the summer after graduation, Chad had the offer to go to France to work for a fancy film company. I wanted to stay in the States. It was sad to end our relationship, but we both knew it was for the better. I didn't want to stand in the way of his dreams. A year after Chad left for France, I met Derek. Derek reminded me a lot of Chad. They were both film bros and had the same kind energy around them. There was only one small problem. Chad was very spontaneous. Even after 3 years together, he would surprise me with a weekend trip to a different state or just randomly take the long route home. Derek wasn't like that. I'm not saying he was boring or not romantic. I'm saying he just liked routine. After 10 years together with him, I found myself missing the spontaneity that Chad had. Either way, when Derek proposed, I said yes. I loved Derek very much, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. We immediately started wedding planning. It was a lot of work. Most nights, Derek and I would just collapse on the couch, totally exhausted. But just knowing that in a couple months we'd be married kept us going. Like I said, I ran into Chad. I was at my wedding dress fitting when I walked out for a little bit to clear my head. I bumped into someone carrying a cup of coffee. The coffee spilled on the street. As I raised my head up to apologize, there he was, Chad. Of course, it's been like 10 years, so he's a little older, but it was still him. Blonde, tan, and boyishly handsome. I was frozen for a while. Chad wasn't. He immediately pulled me into a hug. I held on tight and breathed in his scent. He still smelled the same. How? When we broke apart, we immediately started catching up right on the street. He told me all about the job in France. Apparently, he worked under some big-time indie director out there who taught him so much more about him. He's back in the States for a while, finally shooting a movie of his own. As he kept talking, I couldn't help but see the boy I fell in love with at 19. It was like watching a living time capsule. He looked so handsome, too. The years had been kind to him. When he asked me what I was doing in a wedding dress shop, I panicked. For some reason, the idea of Chad knowing I was engaged made me sad, so I told a lie, the first of many in this story. I told him my cousin was getting married, and as a bridesmaid, I had to be there. Chad didn't notice the lie. He was too busy trying to pull his phone out of his pocket. He handed it over to me and told me to put my number in. I did. Then I added a little heart to it. When he saw that, he smirked a little and looked me up and down. I felt hot all over. He said he'll call. Going back to the wedding dress fitting was hard. After our meeting, I couldn't get him out of my head. Even hours later, when I was eating dinner with Derek, Chad was all I could think about. Derek massaged my feet later that evening. I was on Instagram when I decided to search up Chad's name. As I scrolled through his pictures and videos, I suddenly remembered how spontaneous he was. He had pictures of random impulse buys, spontaneous road trips, and even just a rush of creative vision out of nowhere. When Derek asked me what I was smiling at, I lied and told him my sister sent me a funny text. I then asked him if he ever would impulsively buy a car. Derek scoffed and told me that wasn't financially responsible. The mature thing to do, according to him, would be to plan and save to get a car. His answer disappointed me. We could afford a new car easily. His parents were loaded, and Derek had a high-paying job. We didn't have to be financially responsible or whatever. Chad bought a car on a whim. He was a live-in-the-moment kind of guy, and I liked that. Unknown to Derek, I started hating his responsible character. I spent the next few days waiting for Chad to call. I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would do is check his Instagram. Before I went to bed, I would watch his stories. He was always doing something cool and extraordinary. I wanted to be a part of his life again. The call finally came after 4 days. Derek was in the living room watching some TV, and I was in the kitchen making breakfast. The call came in, and I immediately went into the bathroom. Chad was on the other end. He sounded happy. When I asked why he didn't call me for 4 days, I could literally hear him shrug over the phone as he told me he was busy. He mentioned making it up to me in some way. Then he invited me to brunch with him. I immediately accepted. It was only when the call ended that I remembered Derek. After breakfast, I started getting ready to leave. I was hoping that Derek would go to the gym so I could leave and come back, and he would never even know I was gone. Of all days to take a rest day. When he asked me where I was going, I quickly made up a lie that I was meeting with my friend and sister for brunch. Derek isn't close to my family, so I knew he wouldn't call and ask. Derek believed my lie and even kissed me goodbye. On my way to brunch, I felt so guilty for lying to my boyfriend. He knew who Chad was, and he also knew how important he was to me all those years ago. I could just have said I was meeting him for brunch. He wouldn't have liked it, but I wouldn't have felt guilty for lying to him. When I saw Chad, all that guilt from earlier washed away. He chose an expensive brunch place, one of those places that have tables by the marina. He looked so handsome in his blazer and t-shirt underneath. When he saw me, he flashed that Hollywood smile of his, and I knew I made the right decision. We spent the brunch catching up some more. I hadn't seen him in a decade, and I wanted to know everything about him. He was in the middle of telling me about his niece when he spotted the engagement ring on my finger. His face fell as he asked me what it meant. I came clean. I told him all about Derek and how he was the love of my life. Chad listened to me the whole time. I could tell he didn't like the way the conversation was going, but he kept listening. When I finished, Chad asked me if I ever thought about him. I was speechless. If someone had asked me this a week ago, I would have laughed in their face and said that I hadn't thought of Chad in years. But now, after a week of remembering and catching up, my answer was totally different. I told him the truth. I've been thinking about him nonstop for a week now. He told me to come with him to California for a weekend. Just us. I refused. I told him I still loved Derek and I could never do that to him. He then asked me something. He asked when I lost my spontaneity. I didn't have an answer to that. Had I lost it? Is it possible that when Chad and I broke up all those years ago, that I started to become boring? I didn't like the way that question made me feel, so I stood up to leave. Chad grabbed my hand and shoved a box into my arms. When I asked what it was, he only smiled and said they were memories. When I got back home, I found a note from Derek saying he had to go and pick up a delivery. I opened the box in our living room. Inside were tapes. I got out my old tape player from the attic and spent the afternoon looking through the tapes. Many of them were of me alone. Many of them had me and Chad in them. Chad had recorded them when we were still together. Some of them were a bit spicy. Us in bed together, rolling around in the sheets. I blushed when I saw those ones. I remembered how it felt being in love with Chad, how he made everything feel like an exciting new adventure. That night, as I slept in Derek's arms, I realized something. I missed Chad. I missed our relationship. I missed who I was with him. The next morning, I got a text from Chad. It read, "I'm staying at Westmore Hotel, in case you want to be spontaneous again." I made up my mind quickly after that. I was going to go see him that evening, just to be young and free again. One last time before I got tied down to Derek. Lucky for me, Derek had to go to a convention for 2 days. He left for the airport in the afternoon. By 7 that evening, I was in the lobby of Westmore Hotel. I called Chad to let him know I was there. 2 minutes later, Chad stepped out of the elevator in an expensive suit. He looked me up and down as he walked up to me. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek before guiding me into the restaurant in the hotel. We had a great dinner, reminiscing on old times. After a while, he invited me up to his room to talk some more. When we got there, there was a camera lying on the table. When I turned to look at Chad, he was taking off his jacket. The shirt he wore was hugging him in all the right places. We made eye contact. Before I knew it, we were making out. It felt good, like I was 20 again, kissing the blonde boy from my art club meetings. We fell on the bed and started tearing off each other's clothes. Deep down, I felt bad about what I was doing, but I just pushed the feeling down. That's when I remembered the camera from earlier. I tore my lips off Chad and picked up the camera. I turned it on and got back on the bed. When Chad asked what I was doing, I simply told him that I was making memories. We recorded ourselves having intimacy. It was wild and spontaneous. exactly what had been missing in my life since I broke up with Chad. When we finished, Chad walked me to the elevator. Before I entered, he put out a hand to stop me. He told me to seriously think about his offer. He told me he would love to take me to California with him. I kissed him goodbye and told him that this was just a one-time thing, just to get it out of my system. I just wanted to be who I was again one more time. Chad told me that he respects my decision, but if I ever change my mind, he'd only be a call away. True to my word, months passed and I didn't think of Chad at all. I was happy in my relationship with Derek, and I no longer felt like I was living a boring life. Wedding planning became more and more hectic. Like I said, the wedding was sometime in June. By May, Derek and I decided to make little slideshows of our lives together before we said our vows. We thought it would be a fun way to tell the audience our story without actually telling them. We decided to work on our slideshows separately so we could surprise each other on our special day. Derek did tell me that he was going to make his slideshow a little bit funny. I decided to include a few jokes in mine too. One afternoon, when I was putting together clips to use for the slideshow, I got a delivery. It was from Chad. In the envelope was a small letter where he told me that he had finished up his film, but was going to stay in California for a little while longer. But I didn't care about the letter. The only thing I cared about was the tape that came with it. I knew immediately what it was. The tape that Chad and I had made all those months ago. The spicy one that showed us being intimate. I had totally forgotten we even made it. As I looked at it, I had an idea. I got out the box that Chad had given me a few months ago and took out all the tape recordings in it. I spent the whole afternoon digitizing the tapes. I figured that if Derek wanted us to tell our story, it wouldn't be complete without showing Chad and the relationship we shared. Plus, it would be really funny. Derek would understand that it's a joke. He wasn't the only funny one in our relationship. I only used the clips of us in a normal relationship doing normal relationship stuff. I didn't add the spicy clips of us, especially not the newest one. The day of our wedding came. All of our family and friends were there except for my parents, and it was a truly magical occasion. I couldn't stop thinking about how beautiful the place looked and how handsome Derek looked. Seriously, it was a perfect night. Until it wasn't. Midway through the ceremony, Derek showed his slideshow. It perfectly captured our relationship through pictures and videos. It had a few funny moments slipped in too, but it was mostly a sweet summary of our lives together. By the end, I was teary-eyed and most of our guests were too. When it was my turn, I took the microphone as I pressed play on the laptop. I told the guests that the slideshow was a full representation of the story of our relationship, so I was going to start from the very beginning. The slideshow starts, and it's just pictures and videos of Chad and I in love. The crowd starts murmuring when they realize that it's not Derek in the slideshow. I turn to them, giggling, expecting them to be laughing too. They aren't. Most of them look uncomfortable. Some even look angry. I remember being so confused. Couldn't these people take a joke? I glanced at my husband. Derek's face was bright red, and his fists were clenched as he watched. I could tell he was angry, but I couldn't figure out why. Soon I started hearing moans. I whipped my head around to see what the heck that was. It was a spicy tape, the most recent one. I must have accidentally uploaded it when I was making the slideshow. The crowd started to gasp and scream when they realized what they were seeing. I started scrambling around trying to end the slideshow, but the stupid laptop wasn't responding. Nobody helped me either. They just watched as I tried to stop the recording from playing. After 5 minutes, the laptop finally stopped the video. The entire hall was silent as they all stared at me. I was so embarrassed. I wanted the ground to swallow me. Some of the guests were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I could tell they wanted to leave. To save the wedding, I grabbed the microphone out of the minister's hands. I tried to play off the slideshow as a joke that Derek was in on, but I could tell that none of them believed me. The silence was getting too much for me now. I shoved the microphone back into the minister's hand and told him to continue with the ceremony. The minister leaned in and told me that it was time to exchange our vows. When I looked at him confused, he just sighed and pointed to the table where Derek and I were sitting. Derek wasn't there. The minister told me that he stood up the second the spicy tape started playing. I looked around the hall and I couldn't find him anywhere. That's when one of my bridesmaids told me that he went out the back to the parking lot. I rushed out the hall and saw Derek sitting in his car in the parking lot. The minute he saw me coming towards him, He started speeding out of the lot. I ran up to the car and stuck my head through the window. I was begging him to understand that I didn't mean to show that tape. I just uploaded it with the rest by mistake. Derek scoffed. He looked me right in the eye. I could see the barely hidden anger on his face. He was pissed. Derek asked if I slept with Chad. I tried to dodge the question by telling him that Chad and I dated for years. Of course I slept with him. Derek's face hardened. He asked whether I had slept with him recently. I couldn't lie to him. I told him the truth. I said I had slept with him some months back. Derek pushed me out the window and sped off. I landed in a dirty puddle. When I got up, my wedding dress was ruined. Brown mud now stained the back of it. Behind me, a crowd started to form. It was the guests from the wedding. They had watched the whole thing play out. Some of them looked at me with pity, some with sympathy, some with anger. I didn't know what else to do, so I got in my car and drove off. When I got home, Derek was in the driveway. He was hauling suitcases outside and just leaving them on the sidewalk. I parked my car and ran up to him. I'm sure I looked crazy to the neighbors, but I didn't care. I just needed to beg my husband not to leave. I put a hand on his chest to stop him. I begged him not to leave. I told him that we could still work this out. That's when Derek smirked at me. He told me that the suitcases weren't his. They were mine. He was kicking me out. I followed him into the house screaming at him. How dare he throw my stuff out on the street? Derek didn't even turn to look at me. He just kept pulling my stuff out of closets and stuffing them into suitcases. I was crying by now. I couldn't believe that my sweet boyfriend had been replaced by this monster who was kicking me out of a home that we had shared for years. Technically, the house was his grandmother's, and my name was not on the lease. It was all his. He had every right to kick me out, legally at least. But still, it was a joke. Maybe a poor joke, but I didn't mean anything by it. 20 minutes later, all my stuff was outside. Literally everything I owned. I kept pounding on the door, begging Derek to let me in. He ignored me. After a while, I just sat on the sidewalk and cried. By the time I stopped crying, the streetlights were on. The elderly couple next door came out and threatened to call the police if I didn't move soon. Feeling very sad, I loaded my stuff in the car and drove off. I didn't have any idea where to go. All my friends were Derek's friends too, and I'm sure they hated me right now. I drove to a restaurant instead, still in my wedding dress. People gave me weird looks as I sat and ordered a meal, but I didn't care. As I scrolled through Facebook, I saw something that made my jaw drop. Derek had posted about the wedding disaster on his profile. He went into extreme detail too. Everyone was on his side and insulting me in the comments. I felt my heart break a little bit inside. Fresh tears started to fall. How couldn't they tell that it was just a little joke that didn't land because I made a stupid mistake? They were acting like I did any of this on purpose. Not too long after that, my mom called. I knew I was going to get a scolding, so I ignored it. Behind me, someone called out my name. It was Chad. Guys, I can't even begin to explain how good it felt to see a friendly and familiar face. I hugged him tight and asked him what he was doing here. He told me that he was meeting up with a friend, and he drove down from California. He just finished up with his dinner and was about to head back. He asked why I was dressed in a wedding gown. I came clean and told him everything. Chad found my story hilarious. He was literally on the ground laughing. He told me that he knew that spontaneous girl was still inside me. As I looked at Chad laughing, I suddenly understood what I had to do. I asked him to take me to California with him. Chad didn't hesitate. He took my hand and pulled me to his car. We spent the next 2 days on the road. It felt nice being spontaneous again. I barely thought about Derek and the whole wedding thing. I was happy just being on the road with Chad. Things changed when we got to California. As we pulled into a motel for the night, Chad turned to me with a serious look on his face. He told me that he was leaving me there. I was so confused. I asked him what he meant by that. Chad told me that he didn't want to stay in California anymore. He said that about 3 minutes ago, he made up his mind to go back to France. I couldn't believe my ears. This man drove me all the way out to California just to abandon me here. I asked how I was supposed to get back home, and he just shrugged and told me to figure it out. He pulled me out of his car, dropped all my stuff next to me, and sped off. I was 2 states away from everyone I knew. I had no money whatsoever and no way of going back home. In 5 minutes, The future I had imagined with Chad had disappeared, so I called Derek. Surprisingly, he picked up on the first ring. He sounded calm as he said hello to me. I told him everything, and he listened without saying a word. After I told him the full story, I begged him to come pick me up or send me some money. That's when he laughed. I'll never forget what he told me then. He said that he'll never do anything for me ever again. He said I deserved whatever Chad had done to me. He told me not to call him again. He told me the only thing he'd be sending me is the wedding bill. Apparently, he convinced his parents not to pay for the wedding after I ruined it, and they gave my contact information to the caterers and the hall venue people. I was devastated. Paying for all that plus the damage on the rental dress would put me in crazy debt, especially without his help. I kept begging him, but he just ended the call. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last time I would ever hear his voice. I ended up calling my sister for help. She was very angry with me and called me some horrible names. It hurt, but I knew I deserved them. After getting all the anger out of her system, she sent some money to get a bus back home. The minute I got back to my home state, I knocked on the door to the house I shared with Derek. He didn't answer me. I later saw on Facebook that he had packed up the house and gone on a vacation. The vacation that was supposed to be our honeymoon. I didn't know what to do. I had a life with Derek, and all of a sudden it was slipping away from me. To make matters worse, 2 days later, my mom called again. This time I answered. My parents couldn't make it to the wedding because they went on a holiday to Bali. Derek called them the day of our wedding and told them exactly what happened. They were angry, so angry that they decided to cut me out of their will. They disowned me on the spot. I couldn't believe it. Derek had just ruined my life. I was here, homeless and broke, while he just got to go on a little vacation. It wasn't fair. That was 3 months ago. The entire debt I owe for the wedding disaster is $100,000. I haven't paid back a single penny. I haven't found a job either. The town I live in is relatively small. Everybody knows everybody's business. News of what I did on our wedding day spread around, and nobody wants to hire me. I've been living with my sister, but I'm thinking of leaving the town and going somewhere else, somewhere nobody knows me. My reputation has been ruined in this town because of a stupid joke. But even if I did move, my credit is horrible because of how much I owe. I doubt I'll be able to get a place. As for my parents, they have refused to talk to me for months. They only talk to my sister and pretend that I don't exist. Reputation is very important to my parents, and they feel like I ruined theirs. All my friends have turned their backs on me and sided with Derek. They don't answer my calls. They don't reply to my texts. They don't make plans to hang out with me, and they refuse to hear me out. Even when I see them in public, they look at me with a lot of hate in their eyes. I don't think there's anything I can do to win them back. As for Chad, my ex and affair partner, he's in France now. I left him a long text explaining how what he did was horrible. He replied that he was a spontaneous person, and I should have known that when I hopped in his car. I started to hate Chad and his stupid face, but it doesn't even matter. He's in France, and I doubt he thinks about me at all. As for Derek, he's moved on completely. We live in the same town, so I've tried to get in contact with him many times. He just pretends I'm not there. He walks past me like I wasn't ever a part of his life. It hurts. It hurts a lot. He even has a girlfriend now. I've seen her in his car. I've seen her in his house. I even saw her with his parents one time. The jealousy I feel whenever I see them burns in my chest. I hate her. I hate that she is living the life I'm supposed to have. She's the one kissing the love of my life. He took her on vacation to Sweden. Sweden is somewhere I always wanted to go. Derek knew that. I'm too broke to take the trip myself. I know it's no one's fault but mine. I'm so sad whenever I remember what I had and threw away. All for a stupid joke and a man-child named Chad who still lives life like he's 20. I decided to write this story to get it off my chest completely. I understand if you flame me in the comments. I deserve it completely. But there's nothing you can tell me that I haven't already told myself. I also wrote it to advise you guys. If you find yourself in a situation like this, please just talk it out with your partners. Cheating is not the answer. I regret cheating on Derek every second of every day. If I could go back and change everything that happened, I would. Anyways, I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted to get this out there. Thanks for listening to my story, Reddit. Relevant comments. You thought you could relive your college days with your ex and ended up losing your future husband. Idiot.